The Science of Mental Strength. Introduction. Mental strength is often misunderstood. To some, it sounds like a fixed trait, something people are either born with or without. We imagine the soldier who never cracks under pressure, the entrepreneur who thrives through crisis, or the athlete who seems immune to fear and fatigue. Yet the truth is far more encouraging. Mental strength is not a mysterious gift reserved for a chosen few. It is a skill set, a set of responses, and most importantly, a trainable capacity shaped by both science and practice. Every person has the potential to develop it, and in today's demanding world, learning to strengthen the mind may be one of the most valuable investments you can make in yourself. At its core, mental strength is the ability to manage your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in ways that help you pursue long-term goals despite discomfort, uncertainty, or setbacks. Unlike fleeting motivation or raw willpower, mental strength is built on resilience, discipline, adaptability, and clarity. It does not eliminate stress or challenge. Instead, it equips you to respond to them with composure and purpose. Life will always bring difficulty, but how we meet those moments defines both our achievements and our inner peace. Mental strength gives us the tools to not just endure, but to thrive. Science has made remarkable progress in understanding what happens to the brain and body when we face stress or challenge. For example, neuroscience shows how the amygdala triggers fear responses, how the prefrontal cortex governs rational decision-making, and how the brain's plasticity allows us to rewire habits of thought and reaction. Psychology reveals how belief systems, cognitive reframing, and emotional regulation strategies shape resilience. These findings do not sit in dusty journals. They can be translated into practical methods for everyday life. Mental strength is not about suppressing fear or pretending to be invincible. It is about learning how to work with your biology rather than against it. What makes this subject so urgent is the environment in which we now live. The modern world offers unprecedented opportunities, but it also floods us with distractions, pressures, and uncertainty. We are asked to do more with less time, to compete in fast-changing industries, to balance relationships and responsibilities, and to make sense of an overwhelming stream of information. Anxiety, burnout, and decision fatigue are no longer rare. They are the norm. Mental strength is not just for extreme performers. It is for anyone who wants to remain calm under pressure, focused amid noise, and resilient in the face of inevitable setbacks. This book is designed to guide you on that journey. It will begin by exploring the foundations of mental strength, grounded in the science of how the brain and mind operate under stress. From there, it will break down the core skills: focus, emotional regulation, discipline, confidence, adaptability, that form the backbone of inner resilience. Finally, it will show you how to apply these skills in the real world, in your daily habits, in your relationships, in your work, and in your overall mindset. Each chapter builds upon the last, so that by the end you will not only understand the science, but also embody practices that steadily increase your capacity for strength. The promise of mental strength is not that life becomes easier, but that you become stronger. You will still face fear, setbacks, and failures. You will still have moments of doubt and difficulty, but instead of being ruled by those moments, you will learn how to respond to them. Over time, this shift changes everything. Challenges that once seemed overwhelming become opportunities to grow. Stress that once drained you becomes fuel for focus. The inevitable uncertainty of life becomes less threatening, even energizing. The science of mental strength shows us that resilience is not about being unbreakable. It is about being flexible, adaptive, and purposeful under strain. It is about cultivating a mind that, like a well-trained muscle, grows stronger every time it is tested. That is the journey we are about to take together. Chapter 1. What is mental strength? Mental strength is one of those phrases that seems self-explanatory until you try to pin it down. Ask 10 people what it means and you might hear 10 different answers. Some will say it is the ability to push through pain. Others will claim it is about keeping calm in the middle of chaos. Still others will define it as resilience, grit, or sheer determination. Each of these views captures a piece of the truth, but none of them tell the whole story. To understand mental strength in its entirety, we must look at it from both the scientific and the human perspective, blending psychology, neuroscience, and lived experience into a single, practical definition. At its essence, mental strength is the capacity to control your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in ways that serve your long-term goals, despite discomfort, uncertainty, or adversity. It is not the denial of struggle or the absence of fear. Rather, it is the ability to stay present with those feelings, to regulate them, and to choose your response instead of being hijacked by instinct or impulse. A mentally strong person does not suppress pain or pretend everything is fine. Instead, they recognize the reality of the situation and then act deliberately within it. Mental strength is not the same as toughness, though the two are often confused. Toughness suggests hardness, a kind of emotional armor that resists impact. Mental strength is closer to flexibility. It is the ability to bend without breaking, to adapt without losing your core, to face storms without collapsing. Consider the difference through an everyday example. Imagine two people facing job loss. One reacts with denial, anger, and self-blame, spiraling into despair or distraction. The other feels the same initial shock and pain, but gradually steadies themselves, reframes the setback as an opportunity to explore new paths, and begins taking constructive steps forward. Both experienced distress, both felt fear and uncertainty, but one became consumed by the experience while the other drew on their inner resources to navigate it. That difference is the essence of mental strength. From the scientific standpoint, this capacity arises from the interplay of several systems within the brain and body. The amygdala, a small, almond-shaped structure deep in the brain, constantly scans for threats and sets off alarm signals. This is a useful system. Without it, our ancestors would never have survived predators or natural dangers. But in modern life, the amygdala often overreacts to non-lethal threats like deadlines, social rejection, or financial strain. The prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center, has the job of regulating those fear responses. It helps us evaluate whether the perceived threat truly demands panic or whether calm problem-solving would serve us better. When we practice mindfulness, cognitive reframing, or deliberate breathing, we are effectively strengthening the communication between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, giving us greater control over how we respond to stress. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to rewire and form new connections, means that the more we practice these skills, the more automatic they become. Mental strength is not a trait fixed at birth. It is a skill that grows with deliberate training. Psychology offers another lens. Studies of resilience, grit, and emotional intelligence have shown that what separates those who flourish under adversity from those who falter is not simply raw willpower. It is the ability to frame adversity as a challenge rather than a catastrophe. It is the practice of recognizing emotions without being dominated by them. It is the habit of aligning daily choices with larger values and goals. In other words, mental strength is not about white-knuckling through life. It is about clarity, perspective, and disciplined action. Angela Duckworth's research on grit highlights the power of perseverance combined with passion. Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset reveals how belief in the capacity to improve fundamentally alters performance and resilience. Together, they point toward a mental model in which strength comes not from rigidity but from adaptability, patience, and consistent effort. The cultural myths around mental strength can often obscure its real nature. Society often glorifies the stoic individual who shows no vulnerability, who grinds endlessly without complaint, who seems immune to exhaustion or doubt. But this image is misleading. True mental strength does not mean refusing to feel sadness, anxiety, or fear. It does not mean pretending everything is fine when it is not. That kind of denial often leads to burnout, emotional breakdown, or destructive coping mechanisms. Genuine mental strength involves awareness of vulnerability. It involves the courage to acknowledge difficulty while still choosing to act in alignment with your goals. A person who admits they are afraid but continues forward with clarity and purpose is displaying greater strength than someone who masks their fear and charges ahead blindly. If we look at mental strength through the lens of performance, we see its impact everywhere. Athletes who train their minds as deliberately as their bodies consistently outperform those who rely only on physical ability. Business leaders who cultivate composure and adaptability are better equipped to guide teams through uncertainty. Artists and creators who build resilience against criticism and self-doubt are able to sustain their craft across decades rather than fading after early setbacks. In every domain, mental strength is a multiplier. It does not eliminate obstacles, but it amplifies your ability to face them constructively. So what then does it mean for you to develop mental strength? It means learning to pause before reacting impulsively, to regulate your emotional state rather than being swept away by it, to make choices that align with your deeper goals, even when easier paths tempt you away. It means building habits of focus so that you can direct your attention where it matters most. It means cultivating resilience so that setbacks become temporary detours rather than dead ends. It means developing confidence based not on bravado, but on evidence, on the repeated experience of showing up for yourself and persevering. Mental strength is not something you either have or do not have. It is a continuum. On some days you may feel nearly unshakable, and on others you may find yourself struggling with doubt or distraction. This fluctuation is normal. What matters is not perfection, but progression. Every time you practice self-regulation, every time you push through discomfort toward growth, every time you choose purpose over avoidance, you are building the neural and psychological architecture of mental strength. Over time, these small choices accumulate, reshaping the way you meet challenges. In this book, we will explore how to nurture that capacity. The journey begins with knowledge, understanding how your mind and body respond to stress. From there, it expands into skill building as you learn practical tools for focus, emotional regulation, discipline, confidence, and adaptability. Finally, it moves into integration, showing you how to apply these skills in your relationships, your work, your habits, and your overall mindset. Mental strength is not an abstract ideal. It is a set of trainable practices that, when woven into your daily life, make you more resilient, purposeful, and calm in the face of difficulty. Ultimately, to ask what is mental strength is also to ask what kind of person do I want to be when life challenges me. It is about becoming the version of yourself that shows up with courage instead of avoidance, with clarity instead of confusion, with resilience instead of collapse. It is about cultivating a mind that does not simply endure hardship, but grows through it, finding meaning and power in the very experiences that once threatened to undo you. Mental strength, then, is both a science and an art. A science in the way it harnesses the principles of psychology and neuroscience, and an art in the way each individual expresses it uniquely in their own life. Chapter 2. The Brain on Challenge. Every human being knows what it feels like to be under pressure. The pounding heart before a crucial presentation, the tightness in the chest when facing a conflict, the racing thoughts in the middle of the night when uncertainty looms. These sensations are not signs of weakness. They are the body's natural responses to challenge. For most of history, the ability to react quickly to threats was the difference between life and death. Today, the same biological systems that once helped us escape predators or endure harsh environments are still at work. But they are triggered not just by physical danger, but also by modern challenges like financial stress, deadlines, or social rejection. To understand mental strength, we must first understand what happens in the brain when we face adversity, because the way our minds and bodies react to challenge shapes the foundation of our resilience. At the center of this response is a small almond-shaped structure deep in the brain known as the amygdala. The amygdala's job is to detect threats and activate the body's alarm system. When it perceives danger, whether real or imagined, it triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This reaction prepares the body for what is often called fight, flight, or freeze. The heart rate increases, breathing quickens, and muscles tense, ready for action. For our ancestors, this surge of energy was crucial. Confronted by a predator, they had seconds to decide whether to fight or flee, and the amygdala's alarm gave them the fuel to survive. The problem is that the amygdala does not always distinguish between physical threats and psychological ones. To the brain, being criticized by a boss can light up the same neural circuitry as being cornered by a predator. A looming deadline can trigger the same biological cascade as running for your life. This mismatch between ancient wiring and modern life explains why so many people feel overwhelmed by stress, even when they are not in immediate danger. The brain interprets challenge as threat, and unless we learn to regulate that response, it can hijack our behavior. Fortunately, the human brain has evolved another structure that balances the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex. Located in the front part of the brain, this region is responsible for higher-order thinking, decision-making, impulse control, and planning. While the amygdala sounds the alarm, the prefrontal cortex has the ability to step in, assess the situation, and regulate the emotional surge. If the amygdala is the brain's fire alarm, the prefrontal cortex is the fire chief, deciding whether the alarm signals real danger or just burnt toast. The balance between these two regions largely determines how we respond to challenge. When the amygdala dominates, we react impulsively, often with fear or aggression. When the prefrontal cortex exerts control, we pause, reflect, and respond thoughtfully. This dynamic is not fixed. The strength of the communication between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex can be trained, and this is where the science of mental strength becomes so empowering. Practices such as mindfulness, deliberate breathing, or cognitive reframing enhance the prefrontal cortex's ability to regulate the amygdala. Over time, these practices literally reshape neural pathways. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to change its structure and function in response to experience. Just as lifting weights strengthens muscles, training the mind strengthens the circuits that govern emotional regulation and resilience. This means that the way we respond to challenge is not simply determined by genetics or personality. It is profoundly influenced by how we train our brains. Another key player in the brain's response to challenge is the hypothalamus, which activates the stress response system known as the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. When the amygdala perceives a threat, the hypothalamus releases a chemical signal that cascades through the pituitary gland and adrenal glands, releasing cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones sharpen focus, increase energy, and heighten alertness. In short bursts, this system is highly effective. But when it is activated too often or for too long, it wears down the body and mind. Chronic stress can impair memory, weaken the immune system, and even shrink parts of the brain involved in learning and self-control. This is why mental strength does not mean being constantly on or living in perpetual fight mode. It means knowing how to activate the stress response when it helps and how to calm it when it harms. Challenges also affect another crucial brain system, the reward circuitry. The neurotransmitter dopamine, often associated with pleasure, also plays a major role in motivation and persistence. When we set a goal and make progress toward it, dopamine is released, reinforcing the behavior and giving us a sense of momentum. However, the brain's reward system can be hijacked by distractions, instant gratification, or unhealthy habits. Mental strength involves learning how to align the brain's dopamine system with long-term goals rather than short-term relief. This requires deliberate practice, celebrating progress, breaking down big challenges into manageable steps, and consciously rewarding constructive effort rather than avoidance. Understanding the brain on challenge also means recognizing the role of perception. Two people can face the same difficulty and experience it entirely differently. One sees it as a catastrophe, the other as a test of growth. Neuroscience shows that this difference in appraisal changes the brain's response. When a challenge is viewed as a threat, The amygdala is more active, stress hormones surge, and performance often deteriorates. When the same situation is reframed as a challenge or opportunity, the prefrontal cortex engages more fully, stress hormones are moderated, and performance improves. This is not positive thinking in the superficial sense. It is a measurable shift in brain activity that influences outcomes. Cognitive reframing, one of the most powerful tools of mental strength, rests on this principle. By changing the story we tell ourselves about a challenge, we change the biology of our response. The science makes one truth clear: challenge is not the enemy. It is the context in which growth occurs. Without challenge, the brain does not adapt, skills do not develop, and resilience is never tested. Too little stress leads to stagnation, while too much leads to overwhelm. The sweet spot, what psychologists call e-stress, is where challenge stretches us without breaking us. Mental strength is about finding that zone and staying in it more often. It is about using the stress response as a source of energy, while also knowing when and how to deactivate it. In practical terms, this means cultivating awareness of your own stress signals, practicing techniques that calm the nervous system, and gradually exposing yourself to challenges that expand your capacity. It means learning to notice when your amygdala has taken over and deliberately engaging your prefrontal cortex through grounding, breathing, or reflection. It means training your mind to see obstacles as opportunities for adaptation rather than signs of doom. Over time, these practices transform the brain's circuitry. The alarm system still activates, but it no longer controls you. The executive functions of the brain grow stronger, giving you choice and clarity in moments that once felt overwhelming. When we speak of the brain on challenge, we are really speaking about the story of human resilience. From ancient hunters on the savannah to modern individuals navigating complex societies, the brain has always been wired to react to difficulty. What has changed is not the wiring itself, but the environment in which it operates. By understanding how the brain responds to challenge, we gain the power to work with our biology rather than against it. We learn that mental strength is not about eliminating fear or stress, but about mastering the systems that govern them. In doing so, we discover that every challenge we face is not just a test of endurance, but an opportunity to grow stronger, more adaptable, and more purposeful. Chapter 3: Mind over Wiring. One of the most remarkable discoveries of modern neuroscience is the idea that the brain is not fixed. For centuries, it was believed that once the brain developed into adulthood, its structure and capacity were largely permanent. Damage was thought to be irreversible, habits unchangeable, and intelligence predetermined. But research over the past few decades has overturned this notion, revealing that the brain is constantly reshaping itself in response to experience, practice, and environment. This capacity for change is called neuroplasticity, and it is the scientific foundation for why mental strength can be trained. Understanding neuroplasticity allows us to see that no matter where we start, our thoughts and behaviors carve pathways that can either limit us. The principle is simple but profound. Neurons that fire together wire together. When we repeatedly engage in a thought, an emotional reaction, or a behavior, the connections between the relevant brain cells strengthen. Over time, this makes the pattern more automatic. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. At first, every movement requires deliberate attention and mistakes are frequent, but with practice, neural pathways are reinforced until balance, pedaling, and steering become second nature. The same principle applies not just to physical skills, but to mental habits. If we continually dwell on negative thoughts, those pathways grow stronger. If we regularly practice reframing challenges or calming our breath during stress, those circuits strengthen instead. The brain is always wiring itself based on what we do most often. This adaptability explains why mental strength is not the privilege of a few, but the potential of all. Someone who has struggled with fear or distraction is not doomed to remain that way. With consistent practice, the brain's architecture can shift, creating new responses to old triggers. For example, Mindfulness meditation has been shown to increase activity in the prefrontal cortex while reducing reactivity in the amygdala. Regular journaling and reflection can rewire the brain's default mode from self-criticism to constructive problem-solving. Exposure therapy helps people reprogram their brains to see feared situations as manageable rather than overwhelming. Each of these techniques works not by magically eliminating stress, but by gradually training the brain to respond differently. To see the power of neuroplasticity in action, consider how people recover from brain injuries. Patients who lose the ability to speak or move due to stroke can often regain these skills with therapy. The damaged areas of the brain do not regenerate, but other regions adapt and take over the lost functions. This is an extreme example, but it illustrates the principle. The brain is flexible and responsive to training. If it can reorganize itself after injury, it can certainly adapt in response to the everyday challenges of thought and behavior. Of course, not all plasticity is beneficial. The brain does not distinguish between positive and negative habits. Whatever is repeated tends to get stronger. Someone who consistently numbs stress with unhealthy coping strategies, scrolling endlessly through social media, overeating, or lashing out in anger, is also rewiring their brain, but in ways that reinforce avoidance and impulsivity. This is why mental strength requires intentional practice. Left unchecked, the brain will adapt to whatever we feed it most consistently. To develop resilience and focus, we must consciously direct our practice toward building the circuits that support them. One of the most powerful ways to leverage neuroplasticity is through deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is different from mindless repetition. It involves focused attention, feedback, and gradual stretching beyond current limits. A pianist does not become a virtuoso by playing the same simple tune over and over. They improve by challenging themselves with increasingly complex pieces, correcting mistakes, and refining technique. In the same way, mental strength grows when we deliberately place ourselves in situations that stretch our capacity. This could mean practicing patience in a frustrating situation, choosing to speak up when fear urges silence, or deliberately reframing a setback as an opportunity for growth. Each time we do this, we strengthen the neural pathways associated with resilience and adaptability. Habits also play a crucial role in shaping the wiring of the brain. The routines we follow daily form the backbone of our mental conditioning. Consider the habit of beginning the day by checking the news or social media. This habit wires the brain for distraction and reactivity, setting the tone for the day. By contrast, starting the morning with exercise, journaling, or focused breathing wires the brain for clarity and intentionality. Over time, small habits compound, sculpting the brain's architecture in profound ways. This is why mental strength is not built in grand moments of crisis alone, but in the quiet consistency of daily choices. Another key principle of neuroplasticity is that change requires both challenge and recovery. Just as muscles grow when they are stressed and then allowed to rest, the brain strengthens its circuits when it is pushed slightly beyond comfort and then given time to integrate. This is why practices like meditation or deep rest are not luxuries but essential components of training the mind. They allow the brain to consolidate new connections, repair stress-induced damage, and prepare for the next challenge. In the same way that overtraining the body leads to injury, overstimulating the brain without recovery leads to burnout. Mental strength thrives on a rhythm of effort and renewal. Importantly, the brain's wiring is influenced not just by what we practice, but also by what we believe. Research has shown that people who adopt a growth mindset, the belief that abilities can be developed, are more likely to persist through difficulty and ultimately perform better. This belief itself changes behavior, which in turn rewires the brain. If we view challenges as insurmountable, we avoid them, reinforcing circuits of fear and helplessness. If we see challenges as opportunities to grow, we engage them, strengthening circuits of resilience and courage. In this way, mindset and neuroplasticity work together, creating a feedback loop that either limits or expands our capacity. The implications of this science are both sobering and empowering. It means we are always training our brains whether we realize it or not. Every thought, every reaction, every habit is carving pathways in the mind. The question is not whether the brain is changing, but in which direction. Are we wiring ourselves for distraction, avoidance, and fear, or are we wiring ourselves for focus, resilience, and purpose? The answer lies in the practices we choose and the mindset we cultivate. Mental strength, then, is not about gritting your teeth and pushing endlessly against difficulty. It is about recognizing that the brain is malleable and taking responsibility for how you train it. It is about choosing practices that align your wiring with your deeper goals, so that over time, strength becomes less about conscious effort and more about automatic response. The soldier who remains calm under fire, the leader who steadies a team in crisis, the artist who perseveres through rejection, all of them have trained their minds, whether consciously or unconsciously, to respond in ways that serve their purpose. The same potential exists for each of us. When you begin to see the brain as a living, adaptable system, challenges take on a new meaning. Every moment of stress becomes an opportunity to train. Every setback becomes a chance to rewire. Every choice to pause, breathe, reframe, or persist is another repetition in the practice of building strength. Over weeks, months, and years, these repetitions accumulate, transforming not only how you respond to difficulty, but also who you become in the process. This is the promise of neuroplasticity. This is the essence of mind overwiring. Chapter 4. The Psychology of Resilience. Resilience has become one of the most frequently used words in conversations about success, leadership, and personal growth. We admire resilient people because they seem able to bend without breaking, to stumble without falling apart, and to adapt when the ground shifts beneath them. Yet resilience is often romanticized in ways that make it appear unreachable, as if it belongs only to extraordinary individuals who endure extreme circumstances. The truth is more grounded and more encouraging. Resilience is not an innate trait bestowed on a lucky few. It is a psychological process that can be cultivated. It arises from the ways we interpret experiences, the beliefs we hold about ourselves and the world, and the strategies we use to navigate adversity. To understand resilience is to understand the mental architecture that underlies mental strength. At its core, resilience is the capacity to recover from setbacks, adapt to change, and keep moving forward despite difficulty. Psychologists describe it as a dynamic process rather than a fixed quality. It is not simply the ability to endure hardship passively, nor is it the absence of stress or pain. Instead, resilience involves engaging with adversity in ways that preserve or even enhance functioning. A resilient person does not avoid difficulty or deny suffering. They face it directly and find a way to integrate the experience into a larger narrative of growth. This means that resilience is less about avoiding struggle and more about how we respond to it. One of the psychological foundations of resilience is mindset. Research by Carol Dweck and others has shown that individuals who hold a growth mindset, the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed, are more likely to persevere through challenges than those with a fixed mindset. A growth mindset interprets setbacks as feedback rather than final verdicts. It transforms failure from a sign of personal inadequacy into evidence of learning in progress. When someone with a growth mindset encounters difficulty, they may feel frustration or disappointment, but beneath those feelings lies the conviction that effort and persistence will eventually produce improvement. This belief shapes behavior, which in turn shapes outcomes, creating a feedback loop that strengthens resilience over time. Closely related to mindset is the practice of cognitive reframing. Cognitive reframing is the ability to shift perspective, to reinterpret the meaning of an event in a way that reduces its emotional sting and opens up possibilities for constructive action. Two people may face the same setback. One sees it as a catastrophe, the other as a challenge. This difference in interpretation has profound effects on emotional response and behavior. The first person may withdraw, ruminate, or give up, while the second may engage, learn, and adapt. Reframing is not about denying difficulty or painting it with false optimism. It is about finding interpretations that are both truthful and empowering. For example, losing a job can be devastating, but it can also be reframed as an opportunity to reassess goals and explore new paths. The event does not change, but its meaning does, and that meaning influences resilience. Emotional regulation is another pillar of resilience. Adversity often provokes intense emotions: fear, anger, sadness, shame. If left unchecked, these emotions can overwhelm decision-making and narrow perspective. Resilient individuals are not immune to strong emotions, but they develop strategies for managing them. Techniques such as mindfulness, deep breathing, or expressive writing help reduce the intensity of emotional surges, allowing space for reflection and intentional response. Emotional regulation does not mean suppressing feelings. It means allowing them to exist without being controlled by them. In fact, acknowledging and processing emotions often strengthens resilience by preventing them from festering into chronic stress. Social connection is also central to psychological resilience. Humans are social creatures, and our capacity to withstand adversity is amplified by the presence of supportive relationships. Studies consistently show that people with strong social networks recover more effectively from trauma, illness, and loss. Connection provides both practical assistance and emotional validation. It reminds us that we are not alone, that others care for us, and that together we can find solutions. Resilient individuals cultivate these bonds and are not afraid to lean on others when necessary. Far from being a sign of weakness, seeking support is a strategy of strength because it distributes the weight of difficulty across many shoulders. Optimism, though sometimes misunderstood, is another psychological trait linked to resilience. True optimism is not blind positivity or wishful thinking. It is the habit of expecting that difficulties are temporary and that effort will eventually produce improvement. Optimistic individuals recognize problems, but they also believe in their capacity to solve them. This belief sustains motivation and encourages persistence. Importantly, optimism can be learned. By consciously focusing on past successes, practicing gratitude, and training attention toward potential opportunities, we can shift our outlook over time. This shift does not eliminate hardship, but it alters how we meet it, infusing our actions with hope rather than despair. Purpose and meaning further strengthen resilience by anchoring us in something larger than the immediate difficulty. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, argued that humans can endure almost anyhow if they have a why. When adversity threatens to overwhelm, a sense of meaning provides direction. Purpose does not make pain vanish, but it contextualizes it, turning suffering into part of a larger narrative of growth or service. People who connect their struggles to deeper values, whether family, community, creativity, or faith, often find reserves of strength they did not know they had. This capacity to weave hardship into a meaningful story transforms resilience from mere survival into profound growth. Resilience is not about perfection or constant strength. Even the most resilient individuals have moments of doubt, fatigue, and despair. What distinguishes them is not the absence of these feelings, but their ability to recover and re-engage. They allow themselves to feel discouraged, but they do not remain stuck there. They rest, reflect, and then return to action. In this way, resilience resembles a muscle. Each time it is exercised, each time we endure and adapt, it becomes stronger. And just like a muscle, it grows gradually, not in a single dramatic leap. Small acts of persistence, reframing, regulation, and connection accumulate, building a foundation of resilience over time. What makes the psychology of resilience so empowering is the realization that it is accessible to everyone. No matter your background, your temperament, or your past struggles, you can cultivate resilience. By practicing growth mindset, reframing challenges, regulating emotions, seeking support, nurturing optimism, and connecting to purpose, You build the psychological toolkit that allows you to face life with strength. These are not abstract ideals, but concrete practices that reshape how you experience adversity. In the end, resilience is less about bouncing back and more about moving forward. It is about integrating difficulty into the story of your life in ways that make you stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Adversity will come, as it always does, but with resilience you are not defined by what happens to you, you are defined by how you respond. The psychology of resilience shows us that we are not powerless before hardship. We have within us the capacity to adapt, to grow, and to emerge from struggle not just intact but transformed. Chapter 5. Focus and Attention. In an age where information flows endlessly, where devices buzz for our attention, and where distractions crowd every moment of the day, focus has become both rare and valuable. The ability to direct and sustain attention is no longer simply a helpful skill. It is the very foundation of mental strength. Without focus, discipline falters, resilience weakens, and even the best intentions are scattered. Focus is the gatekeeper of effort. It determines where our energy goes, which tasks are completed, and how deeply we engage with the present moment. To cultivate mental strength without developing focus is like trying to build a house without a foundation. Everything else rests upon it. From the perspective of neuroscience, focus is a function of the brain's attentional networks, primarily centered in the prefrontal cortex. This region acts as a control system, determining which stimuli receive priority and which are filtered out. At any given moment, countless signals compete for your awareness: sounds, sights, thoughts, emotions, memories. If the brain tried to process all of them equally, it would be overwhelmed. Focus allows us to narrow the field, to select the relevant and ignore the irrelevant. This filtering is not static but dynamic, constantly shifting based on goals, environment, and internal states. The stronger the attentional system, the more effectively it can hold the mind on a chosen target despite distractions. However, modern life does not favor focus. We live in a culture of interruption. Notifications, advertisements, endless feeds of content, and multitasking have trained many of us to operate with fragmented attention. Each interruption carries a cognitive cost. Studies show that after being distracted, it can take several minutes to fully regain the original depth of concentration. Over time, constant distraction rewires the brain's attentional circuits, making sustained focus more difficult. The result is a mind that flits restlessly, rarely settling long enough to achieve meaningful depth. This erosion of attention has consequences not only for productivity but also for mental strength, because a scattered mind is more vulnerable to stress, temptation, and impulsive reaction. Focus, however, is not only about avoiding distraction. It is also about cultivating presence. When we direct our attention fully to a task, conversation, or experience, we enter a state of deeper engagement. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi called this state flow, a condition in which challenge and skill are balanced, time seems to disappear, and effort feels both intense and effortless. Flow is not only pleasurable, it is also highly productive. It allows for creativity, mastery, and a sense of fulfillment. Achieving flow requires focus, but it also reinforces focus, creating a positive feedback loop that strengthens mental resilience. Training focus begins with awareness. Many people underestimate how fragmented their attention has become because distraction has become normal. The first step is to notice how often your mind wanders, how frequently you check your phone, or how easily you shift tasks. This awareness is not meant to produce guilt, but to highlight the starting point. From there, deliberate practices can strengthen attention just as exercise strengthens muscles. Mindfulness meditation, for example, is essentially attention training. By focusing on the breath, noticing when the mind wanders, and gently bringing it back, we practice the act of returning attention. Over time, this strengthens the brain's attentional circuits, increasing both focus and emotional regulation. Another practice for cultivating focus is single tacking. In a world that glorifies multitasking, choosing to do one thing at a time is a radical act. Multitasking is largely a myth. The brain does not truly process multiple tasks simultaneously, but rather switches rapidly between them, incurring costs with each shift. Single tacking means giving full attention to one activity until it is complete, or until a deliberate pause is chosen. This practice not only improves efficiency but also strengthens the habit of sustained concentration. Even small acts of single task, reading without checking your phone, eating without distraction, walking without headphones, train the mind to remain present. Focus is also influenced by environment. Just as muscles grow best in conditions that support training, attention thrives when distractions are minimized. Creating an environment conducive to focus may involve silencing notifications, organizing a workspace, or setting boundaries around time and technology. Rituals can further reinforce focus. Beginning work with a consistent routine signals to the brain that it is time for concentrated effort. Over time, these cues create a mental state that is easier to enter and sustain. Focus then becomes not just a matter of willpower, but of design. Yet focus is not only about external tasks. It is also about where we direct our internal attention. Many people find their energy drained not by external noise, but by internal distraction, rumination, worry, daydreaming. The mind is often pulled into the past or projected into the future, rarely resting in the present moment. Mental strength requires learning to direct attention inward with the same discipline as outward. Practices such as journaling, reflection, or mindfulness help train the ability to notice and guide internal focus. Instead of being caught in spirals of unhelpful thought, we can learn to anchor attention to what is constructive. Focus and attention also play a critical role in emotional regulation. When we face stress or fear, the mind often fixates on the source of discomfort, amplifying its power. By redirecting attention, we alter the emotional experience. This is not avoidance, but regulation. For example, focusing on controlled breathing can calm the nervous system, shifting attention away from anxious thoughts. Similarly, focusing on specific actions within our control, rather than on uncontrollable outcomes, reduces feelings of helplessness. Attention becomes not only a tool of productivity, but also a lever of resilience. The relationship between focus and values should not be overlooked. Attention is limited. Whatever we focus on strengthens, while what we neglect withers. If we continually focus on trivialities, we reinforce habits of shallowness. If we consistently direct attention to what aligns with our deepest values and goals, we strengthen habits of purpose. Focus is thus a moral and existential choice as much as a cognitive one. It asks us, what will you give the finite currency of your attention to? The answer shapes not only what you accomplish, but also who you become. Of course, sustaining focus is not about perfection. Minds will wander, distractions will intrude, and lapses will occur. The practice of focus lies in returning, again and again, to the chosen object of attention. Each return is a repetition in the training of mental strength. Over time, these repetitions accumulate, and the ability to focus becomes more natural. Just as athletes build endurance through practice, individuals build attentional endurance through daily choices. The cultivation of focus is therefore not a luxury in the modern world, but a necessity. Without it, we are at the mercy of every distraction, pulled in countless directions, never settling long enough to build depth or resilience. With it, we gain the ability to direct our energy deliberately, to engage fully with challenges, and to align our actions with our goals. Focus transforms scattered effort into meaningful progress and fleeting attention into lasting strength. To develop mental strength is to recognize that attention is the most precious resource you possess. It determines not only what you accomplish, but also how you experience life. In every moment, you have a choice: to scatter it or to concentrate it, to let it be hijacked or to direct it with intention. When you learn to master your focus, you gain access to a deeper form of freedom, the freedom to shape your mind, your actions, and ultimately your life. Chapter 6. Emotional Regulation. Emotions are among the most powerful forces in human life. They shape how we think, how we behave, and how we connect with others. At their best, emotions are guides that highlight what matters most, signaling danger, opportunity, or meaning. Fear warns us of potential threats. Joy signals the presence of something valuable. Anger alerts us to injustice, and sadness helps us process loss. Yet emotions can also become overwhelming, driving impulsive actions or clouding judgment. Mental strength is not about eliminating emotions or pretending they do not exist. It is about developing the capacity to regulate them, to experience them fully without being controlled by them, and to choose responses that align with long-term values and goals. Emotional regulation is the ability to influence which emotions we experience, when we experience them, and how we express them. It is not a matter of suppression or denial, but of skillful management. Suppressing emotions often backfires, leading to increased stress and eventual outbursts. Regulation, by contrast, involves awareness, acceptance, and deliberate strategies for guiding emotional energy. It is the difference between being swept away by a storm and learning how to steer through it. The storm still comes, but the outcome depends on how we navigate. The science of emotional regulation reveals that our brains are wired with both reactive and reflective systems. The reactive system, governed largely by the amygdala, triggers immediate responses to perceived threats. These reactions are fast and automatic, often bypassing conscious thought. The reflective system, centered in the prefrontal cortex, allows for evaluation, perspective, and intentional choice. Regulation depends on strengthening the reflective system so that it can balance and guide the reactive one. When the prefrontal cortex is engaged, we can pause, reframe, and respond thoughtfully, instead of reacting impulsively. This balance is trainable. Practices that enhance mindfulness, cognitive flexibility, and self-awareness increase the brain's capacity for regulation. A key component of regulation is awareness. Many people are swept into emotional reactions without realizing what is happening until afterward. Developing awareness means noticing emotions as they arise, labeling them, and observing their physical and mental effects. Research shows that simply naming an emotion, saying to yourself, "I feel anxious" or "I feel angry," reduces its intensity by engaging the prefrontal cortex. This technique, sometimes called affect labeling, creates a gap between feeling and reaction. Awareness turns an unconscious impulse into a conscious signal, opening space for choice. Acceptance is another pillar of regulation. Often, people make emotions worse by resisting them. Fear of anxiety, anger at anger, or shame about sadness compounds the original feeling. Acceptance means allowing emotions to be present without judgment. It does not mean endorsing destructive behavior. It means recognizing that emotions are natural signals. By allowing them space, we reduce their power. Mindfulness practices cultivate this acceptance, teaching us to observe emotions like passing weather, intense for a time but always shifting. Acceptance, paradoxically, makes it easier to release emotions because what we resist persists, while what we allow often passes more quickly. Once awareness and acceptance are in place, specific strategies can guide emotional responses. Cognitive reappraisal, or reframing, is one of the most effective. It involves changing the way we interpret a situation to alter its emotional impact. For example, a critical comment might first trigger defensiveness. By reframing it as feedback, we reduce anger and increase openness. Reappraisal does not deny reality, but interprets it in ways that are constructive. Studies show that regular practice of reappraisal strengthens emotional resilience, reduces stress, and improves relationships. It is a skill that can be developed like any other, becoming more natural with use. Another strategy is attentional control. Emotions are amplified when we fixate on their source. By redirecting attention, we shift emotional intensity. For instance, focusing on controlled breathing reduces anxiety, while shifting attention from rumination to constructive action eases sadness. Attentional control is not avoidance, but intentional focus on what supports regulation. It reminds us that where attention goes, emotion follows. Physiological regulation is equally important because emotions are embodied experiences. Stress, for instance, manifests in rapid heartbeat, shallow breathing, and tense muscles. By addressing the body, we influence the emotion. Techniques such as deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, or physical movement calm the nervous system, reducing the intensity of emotional surges. This is why practices like yoga, exercise, or even walking can have profound effects on emotional health. The body and mind are inseparable, and regulating one helps regulate the other. Social regulation also plays a role. Sharing emotions with trusted others provides validation, perspective, and support. The act of expressing feelings aloud often diminishes their intensity, while compassionate responses from others reinforce regulation. Conversely, isolation amplifies emotional distress. Strong relationships provide a buffer against emotional overload. Mentally strong individuals do not see seeking support as weakness, but as a wise strategy for maintaining balance. Importantly, emotional regulation is not about being calm all the time. It is about being appropriate to context. Anger, for example, can be destructive when uncontrolled, but constructive when channeled into addressing injustice. Fear can paralyze when exaggerated, but protect when accurate. Joy can inspire but distract when indulged excessively. Regulation means aligning emotional expression with values and goals. It is about having emotions rather than being had by them. In everyday life, regulation plays out in countless small moments. A driver cuts you off in traffic. Do you lash out in rage, or do you breathe, recognize your frustration, and let it go? A colleague criticizes your work. Do you stew in resentment, or do you acknowledge the sting, reframe the comment, and respond constructively? A wave of sadness hits unexpectedly. Do you suppress it with distraction, or do you allow it, reflect on its source, and find meaning in the experience? Each choice is a moment of practice, reinforcing either reactivity or regulation. Over time, the accumulation of these choices builds your emotional capacity. The rewards of emotional regulation extend beyond immediate calm. They include greater resilience, improved relationships, clearer decision-making, and deeper well-being. Regulated emotions free mental energy for focus and creativity. They reduce the wear and tear of chronic stress on the body. They allow for authentic connection because we are not dominated by defensive reactions. They strengthen confidence because we trust ourselves to handle whatever feelings arise. Developing emotional regulation requires patience. It is a lifelong practice, not a one-time achievement. There will be moments of failure, times when emotions overwhelm despite our best efforts. But each time we notice, each time we pause, each time we choose a constructive response, we reinforce the pathways of regulation. Like strengthening a muscle, the progress is gradual but cumulative. What feels difficult at first becomes more natural with repetition, until regulation is not just a skill we use, but a way of being. In the end, emotional regulation is about freedom. It frees us from being puppets of impulse. It frees us from cycles of regret that follow rash reactions. It frees us to act in alignment with our highest values even when emotions surge. To regulate emotions is not to deny humanity, but to embrace it fully, to acknowledge the richness of feeling while steering it wisely. Mental strength rests on this freedom, for without regulation, strength collapses into reactivity. With regulation, strength becomes not just endurance, but wisdom in action. Chapter 7: Discipline and Self-Control. Discipline and self-control form the backbone of mental strength. They are the forces that allow us to act consistently with our long-term goals even when our impulses or emotions urge us toward short-term comfort. Without discipline, focus drifts, resilience falters, and intentions never transform into reality. Self-control is the ability to regulate immediate desires, while discipline is the ongoing practice of aligning behavior with chosen values. Together, they create the structure within which freedom is possible. For freedom is not the absence of constraint, but the capacity to live in accordance with what matters most. From a biological perspective, self-control is largely governed by the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive functions such as planning, decision-making, and impulse regulation. This region is often in tension with deeper structures such as the limbic system, which drives urges for immediate gratification. The classic marshmallow test, conducted in the 1960s, illustrated this tension. Children were offered one marshmallow immediately or two if they could wait. Follow-up studies found that those who delayed gratification tended to achieve better outcomes in life, from academic performance to health and relationships. While the study has since been critiqued and nuanced, its central lesson remains. The ability to resist short-term temptation in pursuit of long-term rewards is a critical skill for success and well-being. Yet self-control is not about harshly denying every desire or forcing constant restraint. That approach often leads to burnout or rebellion. Instead, true discipline arises from clarity of purpose and the cultivation of habits that make self-control easier. When we know why we are pursuing a goal, when it resonates with our deepest values, restraint becomes less of a burden and more of a conscious choice. A person training for a marathon does not experience every skipped indulgence as suffering, because each act of discipline connects to a vision of achievement. The same is true in creative work, professional growth, or personal transformation. The clearer the connection between action and purpose, the more sustainable discipline becomes. Habits are another key to discipline because they reduce the need for constant willpower. Willpower is a limited resource. It can be depleted by stress, fatigue, or decision overload. Habits, by contrast, automate behavior, conserving energy. Once established, a habit requires less conscious effort, making discipline feel less like struggle and more like routine. For example, brushing teeth requires little discipline once it is ingrained. Similarly, a habit of daily exercise, structured work sessions, or mindful reflection creates a framework of discipline that sustains itself. Building habits involves starting small, being consistent, and designing environments that support desired behavior. Over time, habits transform discipline from a daily battle into a natural rhythm. Environment plays a powerful role in self-control. Research shows that willpower alone often fails when temptations are constant. Successful self-regulation often comes not from heroic resistance, but from wise design. Removing distractions, structuring routines, and surrounding oneself with supportive influences reduce the friction of discipline. For instance, someone who keeps unhealthy snacks out of the house requires less self-control to eat well. Someone who designs their workspace to minimize interruptions finds focus easier. Discipline thrives when the environment supports it, and mental strength involves recognizing the importance of these external structures. Emotional regulation, discussed previously, is also intertwined with discipline. Impulses often arise from emotional states: stress, boredom, frustration, excitement. Without emotional awareness, discipline is undermined by reactive decisions. With awareness, we can pause, regulate, and choose in alignment with values. For example, instead of soothing stress with procrastination, one might pause, breathe, and take a small step toward the task at hand. Discipline is not a rigid suppression of emotion, but a skillful integration of emotion into purposeful action. Another dimension of discipline is consistency. It is easy to act with resolve for a day or a week, but mental strength requires sustained commitment over months and years. Consistency builds trust in oneself. Each time you follow through on a commitment, you reinforce the belief that you can rely on your own word. This self-trust becomes a foundation for confidence and resilience. Conversely, repeatedly breaking promises to yourself erodes confidence, making discipline harder. Thus, maintaining discipline is not only about achieving external goals, but also about cultivating internal integrity. Importantly, discipline must be balanced with flexibility. Rigid control can lead to brittleness, while adaptive discipline recognizes that circumstances change. The disciplined individual does not abandon goals at the first setback, but neither do they cling so tightly to routines that they become destructive. True discipline involves knowing when to persist and when to adjust. It is about commitment to principles rather than obsession with perfection. This flexibility prevents burnout and allows discipline to be sustainable over the long term. Self-control also extends beyond individual goals to relationships and society. The ability to regulate impulses influences how we communicate, resolve conflict, and build trust. Speaking in anger may provide temporary release, but damages connection. Exercising self-control to pause, reflect, and respond thoughtfully strengthens relationships. Discipline in commitments to others, showing up on time, following through on promises, contributing consistently, creates reliability that benefits both self and community. Thus, discipline and self-control are not purely personal virtues, but social ones, shaping how we live together. The practice of discipline can be seen as a training ground for freedom. Without discipline, we are slaves to impulse, tossed about by craving, fear, and distraction. With discipline, we create the capacity to choose deliberately, to act in accordance with what we value rather than what we feel in the moment. This is not a constraint but a liberation. The musician who practices daily gains the freedom to perform with mastery. The writer who disciplines themselves to write consistently gains the freedom to express deeply. The person who disciplines their habits of health gains the freedom of energy and longevity. Discipline is not the opposite of freedom, but its condition. Cultivating discipline requires patience. Progress is often gradual, marked by small victories and setbacks. There will be times of failure, moments when temptation overcomes resolve. Mental strength does not mean never failing, but recovering quickly, learning from lapses, and recommitting. Each failure is itself an opportunity to practice discipline, to reinforce resilience rather than defeat. Over time, these cycles of effort, lapse, and renewal build a durable foundation of self-control. Ultimately, discipline and self-control are about alignment. They align present action with future vision, impulse with intention, and daily choice with enduring values. They are the mechanisms by which goals become reality and by which mental strength takes form in daily life. To cultivate discipline is to cultivate the power to shape your life deliberately, to resist being pulled endlessly by immediate desires, and to live instead by desire. It is the quiet strength of showing up consistently, of choosing wisely, of building over time what cannot be built in a single burst of effort. Discipline is not glamorous, but it is transformative. It is the steady hand that holds the course when storms arise, the unshakable thread that weaves together the fabric of mental strength. Chapter 8. Confidence and Self-Belief. Confidence is often misunderstood. Many see it as a personality trait, something you either have or do not, or they confuse it with arrogance and bravado. True confidence is neither boastful posturing nor blind optimism. It is a grounded belief in your ability to meet challenges and adapt to circumstances. Self-belief is the inner conviction that, regardless of uncertainty or difficulty, you can navigate the situation and grow through it. It does not mean knowing that you will never fail. Rather, it means trusting that failure will not define you and that you can rise again. Confidence and self-belief are not about external validation, but about internal trust, and they are essential components of mental strength. At the heart of confidence is experience. When we act, take risks, and persevere, we accumulate evidence that we can handle difficulty. This evidence forms the foundation of self-belief. Consider the person who avoids challenges out of fear of failure. They protect themselves from discomfort, but they also rob themselves of opportunities to prove their capacity. Their confidence remains fragile because it lacks evidence. By contrast, someone who takes on challenges, even small ones, collects proof with each effort. They may stumble, but each recovery teaches resilience. Over time, the repeated act of showing up builds a deep reservoir of trust in their own ability to endure. Confidence grows not from wishing, but from doing. Psychology supports this. Albert Bandura, the psychologist who developed the concept of self-efficacy, argued that belief in one's ability to succeed in specific situations strongly influences outcomes. Self-efficacy arises primarily from mastery experiences, successfully completing tasks and overcoming obstacles. It also grows from observing others succeed, receiving encouragement, and managing emotional states. When we experience success, however small, our brain encodes the experience, reinforcing the belief that we can succeed again. When we see someone like us achieve a goal, our belief expands. When we receive genuine encouragement, our perception of our own ability shifts. When we learn to regulate stress, our confidence improves because emotions no longer overwhelm performance. Self-efficacy then is not a fixed quality but a dynamic, trainable belief system that strengthens with experience and practice. Confidence is also shaped by the stories we tell ourselves. Self-talk, the inner dialogue that runs through our minds, can either erode or reinforce belief. Negative self-talk magnifies doubt. I'm not capable, I'll fail, I'm not enough. Over time, these thoughts wire the brain toward insecurity. Positive and constructive self-talk, by contrast, shifts perspective. I've handled challenges before, I can learn, I can grow. This does not mean pretending difficulties do not exist, but choosing interpretations that empower rather than paralyze. Changing self-talk requires awareness first, noticing the patterns of doubt, and then deliberate practice in reframing those patterns into supportive statements. The voice we cultivate inside our minds becomes the tone of our confidence. Importantly, confidence is not the absence of fear. Many people assume that confident individuals do not feel nervous, anxious, or uncertain. In reality, confident people feel the same emotions but interpret them differently. They see nerves as excitement, fear as a signal of growth, uncertainty as an opportunity for discovery. Instead of waiting for fear to vanish before acting, they act alongside fear, trusting that action itself will expand their capacity. This distinction is crucial. Confidence does not precede action, it emerges from action. Waiting until you feel completely ready often means never starting. Taking the first step, even with trembling hands, builds the very confidence you seek. Self-belief also depends on authenticity. Pretending to be someone you are not, or chasing confidence through comparison, undermines true belief. Genuine confidence arises from alignment with values, from knowing who you are and living consistently with that knowledge. It grows from recognizing both strengths and weaknesses without distortion. Arrogance inflates strengths and denies weaknesses, creating a fragile facade. Insecurity exaggerates weaknesses and dismisses strengths, shrinking potential. True self-belief acknowledges both honestly and still chooses to move forward. This balanced perspective allows for humility and courage simultaneously, the recognition that while you are not perfect, you are capable and adaptable. Another critical dimension of confidence is preparation. Confidence without preparation often collapses under pressure, while preparation builds trust in one's ability. The athlete who trains rigorously, the speaker who rehearses thoroughly, the professional who studies their craft, all approach challenges with a sense of earned belief. This kind of confidence is not wishful, but grounded. It comes from knowing that you have done the work and can rely on your training when difficulties arise. Preparation transforms anxiety into readiness because uncertainty is reduced by the solidity of practice. Confidence also flourishes in community. While self-belief is an inner quality, it is nurtured by external support. Encouragement, mentorship, and constructive feedback from others expand our perspective on our abilities. We often underestimate ourselves until someone else reflects our potential back to us. Supportive relationships remind us of our capacity when we forget it ourselves. At the same time, confidence grows when we offer support to others, because teaching, encouraging, and leading reinforce our own belief in our strengths. Confidence is contagious, and both giving and receiving it strengthens self-belief. Failures and setbacks, far from destroying confidence, can become its strongest builders if approached constructively. Each time we fall and rise again, we prove resilience. Each lesson learned in failure becomes part of the story of our capability. The difference lies in interpretation. Those who see failure as final damage their self-belief. Those who view it as feedback expand their confidence. The most confident individuals are not those who never fail, but those who know they can fail and still continue. They trust not in perpetual success, but in their ability to endure and adapt. It is important to recognize that confidence is contextual. Someone may feel confident in their professional skills but insecure in social settings, or confident in physical abilities but doubtful in intellectual pursuits. Confidence is not a blanket quality but varies across domains. This means it can be built deliberately in any area of life by seeking mastery experiences, reframing challenges, practicing preparation, and cultivating supportive self-talk. Over time, confidence in one area can spill into others, creating a general sense of self-belief that strengthens overall resilience. Ultimately, confidence and self-belief are about trust. Trust that you can face difficulty, trust that you can learn from mistakes, trust that you can grow through adversity. This trust does not mean certainty of outcome, but certainty of capacity. Life will always bring unknowns, risks, and setbacks. Confidence does not eliminate these, but transforms your relationship to them. Instead of seeing them as threats, you see them as opportunities to demonstrate and expand your strength. Confidence, then, is not the loud declaration of invulnerability, but the quiet assurance of adaptability. It is not built in a single moment, but in countless small choices to act, to persevere, to rise after falling. It is the accumulation of evidence that you are capable, the reinforcement of supportive self-talk, the alignment of action with values, and the grounding of preparation. With each step, confidence deepens until self-belief is no longer a fragile hope, but a resilient conviction. This is the confidence that sustains mental strength, the belief that no matter what comes, you can meet it with courage and grow through it. Chapter 9. Adaptability and Flexibility. If resilience is the ability to recover from setbacks, adaptability is the ability to adjust to changing conditions, and flexibility is the willingness to bend without breaking. In a world where change is constant, uncertainty unavoidable, and challenges unpredictable, adaptability and flexibility are not optional qualities, but essential components of mental strength. The individuals and organizations that endure and thrive are rarely those that resist change stubbornly, but those that shift, reconfigure, and evolve while holding on to their core values. Adaptability is not about passively accepting everything or constantly changing direction without stability. It is about remaining anchored while learning to move with circumstances rather than against them. The psychology of adaptability begins with mindset. A rigid mindset interprets change as threat, uncertainty as danger, and deviation from the plan as failure. This rigidity produces stress, frustration, and resistance, because life rarely unfolds in straight lines. A flexible mindset, by contrast, sees change as natural and inevitable. Instead of clinging to fixed expectations, it asks, "What now? How can I respond to this new reality?" This openness reduces resistance and unlocks creativity. It does not mean that disappointment disappears, but it transforms disappointment into a starting point for new solutions. Adaptability begins with the willingness to see that plans are provisional, that success is not a single path, but a dynamic process. From a neurological perspective, adaptability depends on the brain's capacity for cognitive flexibility. This is the ability to shift perspectives, change strategies, and update beliefs when new information arises. It is supported by the prefrontal cortex, which helps us override automatic responses and reorient attention. Just as neuroplasticity allows the brain to rewire itself through practice, cognitive flexibility allows the mind to adjust in the face of novelty. Studies have shown that individuals with greater cognitive flexibility are better at problem solving, more creative, and more resilient under stress. This flexibility can be trained by exposing oneself to new experiences, learning diverse skills, and practicing perspective-taking. The brain grows stronger in adaptability the more it is challenged to adjust. One of the greatest obstacles to adaptability is fear of the unknown. Uncertainty triggers the amygdala, producing anxiety and a desire for control. This fear can lead to clinging rigidly to familiar routines or resisting change outright. Yet, mental strength requires learning to coexist with uncertainty, to see it not as an enemy but as a space of potential. The truth is that life has always been uncertain. Control has always been partial. Recognizing this truth can be liberating. Instead of exhausting ourselves trying to predict or control everything, we can focus on what is within our influence and remain open to the rest. Adaptability is not about erasing fear of uncertainty, but about moving forward despite it. Adaptability also involves creativity, the ability to generate new responses when old ones fail. When circumstances shift, rigid strategies collapse. Creative adaptability seeks alternatives, experiments, and innovations. This is evident in businesses that pivot during economic downturns, in individuals who reinvent careers after job loss, and in communities that rebuild after disaster. Creativity in adaptation does not mean reckless change, but thoughtful experimentation. It requires humility to admit that old strategies are no longer sufficient, and courage to test new ones without guaranteed success. Flexibility is the willingness to try, fail, adjust, and try again. Flexibility extends beyond action to identity. Many struggles with adaptability arise because people cling to rigid self-concepts. I am this kind of person. I cannot do that. This is not who I am. While a strong sense of identity is important, overly rigid identities can limit growth. Flexibility means holding identity as a living story rather than a fixed label. It allows us to integrate new experiences without feeling that they threaten our existence. The adaptable individual can say, "This is who I have been, but I can also be this." They expand rather than contract in the face of change. This expansion builds resilience because it allows for transformation without collapse. Social adaptability is equally important. Relationships inevitably involve change, people grow, circumstances shift, dynamics evolve. Flexibility in relationships means adjusting communication styles, expectations, and roles in response to these changes. It means allowing space for others to grow without rigidly clinging to who they once were. In conflict, adaptability means listening, reframing, and seeking compromise rather than holding inflexibly to one position. Flexibility in relationships does not mean abandoning boundaries or values, but balancing firmness with openness, stability with adaptability. Another dimension of adaptability is persistence without rigidity. Mental strength requires distinguishing between giving up and adapting. Rigid persistence may push forward blindly, wasting energy on a path that no longer exists. True adaptability means holding the goal firmly while being flexible with the path. A mountain climber may find one route blocked and choose another. The destination remains, but the approach shifts. Similarly, in life, adaptability means maintaining commitment to deeper values while adjusting strategies in response to reality. This balance prevents both stagnation and aimless wandering. Adaptability is not purely reactive but also proactive. It involves anticipating change and preparing for it. This does not mean predicting every outcome but cultivating readiness to adjust. Proactive adaptability includes developing diverse skills, cultivating emotional resilience, and building supportive networks. It means training the mind to expect change as normal so that when it arrives, it is not paralyzing. Just as athletes cross-train to prepare for unexpected demands, adaptable individuals broaden their capacities to remain versatile. The practice of adaptability also requires letting go. Much of the suffering during change arises not from the change itself, but from clinging to what is no longer possible. Letting go is difficult because it often involves grief, the acknowledgement that something valued has ended. Yet letting go creates space for new beginnings. Flexibility does not deny loss, but accepts it as part of life's movement. By releasing what cannot be preserved, we free energy to engage with what can be created. Ultimately, adaptability and flexibility are about alignment with reality. Life is fluid, uncertain, and dynamic. To resist this truth is to exhaust ourselves fighting what cannot be stopped. To embrace it is to find freedom, creativity, and resilience. Mental strength requires standing firm in values while moving fluidly with circumstances, bending without breaking, adjusting without losing core purpose. This balance is not always easy, but it is the essence of growth. Adaptability and flexibility transform adversity into evolution. They allow us not only to survive change, but to be reshaped by it in ways that expand capacity. The adaptable mind does not shatter when plans fail, it searches for new routes. The flexible spirit does not collapse when identity is challenged. It grows to encompass new possibilities. This capacity is not fixed but cultivated, practiced in daily choices to accept, adjust, and move forward. In the end, adaptability is less about changing who we are and more about discovering how much more we can become. Chapter 10. Stress as a Superpower. Stress is one of the most misunderstood forces in human life. For many, the very word carries negative connotations: exhaustion, pressure, illness, burnout. Entire industries are devoted to stress reduction, and countless people dream of eliminating stress altogether. Yet the science of stress tells a more complex story. Stress in itself is not the enemy. It is a biological and psychological response designed to help us survive and perform. Without stress, our ancestors would not have reacted swiftly to danger, and without stress, we would not rise to meet challenges today. Stress becomes harmful not because it exists, but because of how we interpret it, how long it lasts, and how we manage it. When understood and harnessed, stress can be transformed from a source of damage into a source of strength. It can become, quite literally, a superpower. The stress response is the body's way of mobilizing energy for action. When the brain perceives a challenge or threat, the amygdala signals the hypothalamus, which activates the sympathetic nervous system. Adrenaline surges, heart rate increases, breathing quickens, and glucose floods the bloodstream to fuel muscles. This cascade, often called the fight or flight response, prepares the body for immediate action. In moderation, this reaction sharpens focus, heightens alertness, and enhances performance. Athletes often perform their best under the stress of competition. Speakers find their energy sharpened by pre-performance nerves. Professionals complete difficult tasks under pressure they might otherwise have avoided. Stress, in short bursts, is not a weakness but a performance enhancer. Problems arise when stress becomes chronic. If the stress response is activated too frequently or does not shut down after the challenge passes, the body and mind pay the price. Prolonged exposure to cortisol and adrenaline damages physical health, impairs memory, disrupts sleep, and weakens the immune system. Psychologically, chronic stress leads to anxiety, burnout, and emotional exhaustion. The distinction between helpful stress and harmful stress lies largely in perception and regulation. Stress that is interpreted as overwhelming and inescapable erodes resilience. Stress that is viewed as meaningful, temporary, and manageable enhances it. Psychologist Kelly McGonigal has described this shift in perspective as the stress mindset. In her research, she found that people who believe stress is harmful tend to experience more negative outcomes, while those who believe stress can be helpful show greater resilience and even improved health. The key difference lies in interpretation. When stress is seen as a signal that the body is mobilizing resources for performance, the physiological response itself changes. Blood vessels remain more relaxed, heart rate variability improves, and the experience becomes energizing rather than damaging. In other words, how we think about stress changes how stress affects us. Reframing stress begins with awareness. Instead of labeling every surge of adrenaline as dangerous, we can interpret it as readiness. The racing heart before a presentation is not a sign of weakness, but of preparation. The restless energy before a challenge is the body fueling itself. By shifting perspective, we transform anxiety into excitement and nervousness into focus. This reframe does not eliminate stress, but redirects it, turning a potential liability into an asset. Another way to harness stress is to connect it with purpose. Stress is more tolerable, even motivating, when it is tied to something meaningful. Parents endure sleepless nights for their children because the stress serves love and responsibility. Entrepreneurs face uncertainty because their work embodies passion and vision. Students push through exams because education is linked to future goals. Stress divorced from purpose feels oppressive. Stress aligned with purpose feels empowering. To use stress as a superpower, we must connect challenges to values so that the energy mobilized by stress serves something larger than immediate discomfort. Physiological strategies can also transform stress. The same body that ramps up under stress can be guided back into balance through practices that activate the parasympathetic nervous system, often called the rest and digest system. Slow, deep breathing, meditation, and physical exercise reduce the harmful effects of chronic stress. Exercise is particularly powerful because it uses the energy mobilized by stress in the way it was originally intended, through movement. Regular exercise not only relieves stress but also trains the body to recover more quickly after stress responses, building resilience over time. Stress can also be harnessed through gradual exposure. Just as muscles grow by being stressed and then recovering, mental and emotional strength grow through manageable challenges. Psychologists call this stress inoculation. By intentionally exposing ourselves to small stressors and learning to regulate responses, we build tolerance for larger ones. This is why practices like cold exposure, public speaking training, or tackling progressively difficult tasks can expand resilience. Each successful encounter with stress proves to the brain that we can handle more than we thought. The stress response remains, but instead of overwhelming us, it strengthens us. Community plays an essential role in stress resilience. Social support transforms stress into bonding rather than isolation. Research shows that oxytocin, often called the tend and befriend hormone, is released during stress and encourages us to connect with others. When we share our struggles, receive encouragement, and face challenges together, stress becomes a force that unites rather than divides. Mentally strong individuals do not isolate themselves under stress. They lean on networks of trust and provide support in return. This mutual resilience amplifies individual capacity and creates collective strength. Perhaps the most important aspect of harnessing stress is balance. Stress is not inherently bad, but it must be balanced by recovery. Just as athletes alternate between intense training and rest, mentally strong individuals cycle between challenge and renewal. Recovery practices such as sleep, rest, reflection, and play are not indulgences, but essential complements to stress. Without them, the system burns out. With them, stress becomes a source of growth. The interplay of stress and recovery is what builds lasting strength, allowing us to stretch without breaking. To view stress as a superpower requires abandoning the fantasy of a life without difficulty. Such a life does not exist, and if it did, it would rob us of growth. Stress is woven into the fabric of being human, inseparable from learning, striving, and connecting. Every major achievement in history has involved stress. Every act of courage, every creative breakthrough. The question is not whether stress will appear, but how we will meet it. With awareness, reframing, regulation, and purpose, stress becomes a force that sharpens rather than shatters, fuels rather than drains. In the end, stress reveals our relationship with challenge. If we fear it, resist it, and let it linger unchecked, it erodes us. If we understand it, harness it, and balance it with recovery, it strengthens us. Stress, properly managed, is not a burden to eliminate, but a resource to cultivate. It is the body and mind's way of saying, you are being called to rise. To treat it as a superpower is to recognize that within every surge of pressure lies an invitation to grow, to focus, to connect, to become more resilient. Stress will always be with us, but whether it is our enemy or our ally depends on how we choose to see it. Chapter 11. The Habits of the Mentally Strong. Mental strength is not forged in a single moment of crisis. It is built in the small, daily actions that shape our character, our mindset, and our resilience. Habits are the invisible architecture of our lives. They determine what we do without constant deliberation, conserve mental energy, and create the conditions for growth or decline. The habits of the mentally strong are not necessarily dramatic or extraordinary. Often, they are simple practices repeated consistently. What makes them powerful is not their complexity but their cumulative effect. Over time, these habits wire the brain, condition the body, and anchor the spirit in ways that allow individuals to thrive under pressure and recover from setbacks. One of the most foundational habits of the mentally strong is deliberate self-reflection. Instead of moving through life on autopilot, they pause regularly to examine their thoughts, choices, and experiences. Reflection can take many forms: journaling, meditation, quiet walks, or structured reviews of the day. The purpose is not self-criticism, but awareness. Reflection reveals patterns, highlights progress, and identifies areas for growth. Without reflection, we repeat the same mistakes unconsciously. With it, we transform experiences into lessons. This habit strengthens the connection between action and insight, making resilience less reactive and more intentional. Another essential habit is the consistent practice of physical care. The body and mind are inseparable, and neglecting one undermines the other. Mentally strong individuals recognize that sleep, nutrition, and movement are not luxuries but foundations. Adequate sleep restores cognitive function and emotional regulation. Balanced nutrition fuels focus and energy. Regular exercise not only strengthens the body but also reduces stress, enhances mood, and trains the nervous system to recover from arousal more quickly. By protecting their physical foundation, mentally strong individuals ensure that their psychological capacity rests on solid ground. They understand that it is difficult to manage stress, regulate emotions, or maintain focus when the body is chronically depleted. Mentally strong people also cultivate the habit of intentional focus. In a world saturated with distractions, they train their attention through deliberate practices such as single-tasking, setting boundaries with technology, and creating environments conducive to concentration. This does not mean they never lose focus, but that they consistently return to what matters. They practice saying no to distractions in order to say yes to priorities. Over time, this habit strengthens attentional control and reduces the vulnerability to constant external pulls. Focus, once cultivated as a habit, becomes the default rather than the exception. Another key habit is the regular reframing of challenges. Mentally strong individuals train themselves to see obstacles not only as setbacks, but also as opportunities for growth. This does not mean they deny difficulty, but that they deliberately interpret adversity in constructive ways. By asking questions such as, "What can I learn from this?" or "How might this make me stronger?" they shift the emotional impact of challenges. Over time, reframing becomes a natural response rather than a forced technique. This habit wires the brain to interpret stress as manageable and meaningful, building resilience at a structural level. The mentally strong also practice gratitude consistently. Gratitude is not simply a fleeting feeling, but a deliberate focus on what is good, even in the midst of difficulty. This habit shifts attention from what is lacking to what is present, from scarcity to abundance. Studies show that gratitude practices reduce stress, improve well-being, and enhance resilience. For the mentally strong, gratitude is not reserved for easy times, but is cultivated, especially during hardship. By acknowledging even small sources of goodness, they maintain perspective and prevent despair. Gratitude becomes both a stabilizer and a source of energy. Boundaries are another crucial habit. Mentally strong individuals know when to say no, when to step back, and when to protect their time and energy. They recognize that constantly pleasing others or overextending themselves leads to depletion and resentment. Boundaries are not walls but filters, allowing in what aligns with values and excluding what undermines them. This habit requires courage because saying no often invites disapproval, yet over time it strengthens autonomy and self-respect. By practicing boundaries consistently, mentally strong people preserve the energy required to meet their deepest goals. Mentally strong people also cultivate habits of consistent action. They do not wait for motivation to strike before taking steps toward their goals. They create routines that carry them forward even when they do not feel like it. This habit transforms effort from a matter of mood into a matter of practice. By breaking goals into daily actions and showing up consistently, they accumulate progress over time. The habit of consistent action reinforces discipline and builds confidence because each completed step is evidence of reliability. Small acts of persistence add up to substantial transformation. A further habit is the practice of seeking growth through discomfort. Mentally strong individuals do not avoid difficulty but lean into it as a training ground. They might deliberately challenge themselves with new skills, place themselves in situations that stretch their capacity, or face fears gradually rather than avoiding them. This habit inoculates them against helplessness, proving repeatedly that discomfort can be endured and transformed into growth. Over time, the unfamiliar becomes less intimidating and adaptability becomes second nature. By making a habit of small acts of courage, they prepare for larger challenges. Social habits are equally important. Mentally strong individuals surround themselves with supportive, positive, and growth-oriented people. They invest in relationships that nourish rather than drain, and they contribute to others' growth as well. They practice empathy, active listening, and constructive communication. These habits create a network of resilience because no one is mentally strong in isolation. Community provides perspective, encouragement, and accountability, amplifying individual strength. By making connection a habit, mentally strong individuals ensure they do not face life's challenges alone. Finally, mentally strong individuals maintain the habit of aligning actions with values. They regularly return to the question of what matters most and adjust their behavior accordingly. This alignment prevents the drift into meaningless busyness and anchors their energy in purpose. Habits without alignment can become hollow routines. Habits guided by values become powerful expressions of meaning. By practicing this alignment daily, mentally strong people cultivate integrity, the congruence between belief and action that deepens resilience and confidence. Taken together, these habits form a web of support that sustains mental strength. None of them is glamorous. Most are simple, sometimes even mundane. Yet it is precisely their simplicity that makes them powerful, because they can be practiced consistently. The strength of habits lies in accumulation. Each act of reflection, each choice of focus, each expression of gratitude, each boundary honored, each step of consistent action, these build over time until resilience and clarity are not occasional achievements, but everyday realities. Mental strength is not a heroic burst of effort, but a cultivated way of life, and habits are the soil in which it grows. Chapter 12. Mental Strength in Relationships. Mental strength is often spoken of in individual terms, how we manage our own thoughts, emotions, and actions. Yet no one lives in isolation. Our lives are deeply intertwined with the lives of others, and the strength of our relationships often determines the quality of our well-being. Resilience, focus, discipline, and confidence are not only inner qualities, but also interpersonal ones, expressed and tested in the presence of others. To be mentally strong in relationships means to navigate the complexities of human connection without losing balance, to set boundaries without guilt, to communicate with clarity rather than reactivity, and to remain true to values while being flexible with others. Relationships test mental strength because they touch on our deepest needs for connection, belonging, and recognition. At the same time, they trigger vulnerabilities, insecurities, and fears of rejection. When conflicts arise, when expectations differ, when emotions run high, the skills of mental strength become crucial. Emotional regulation prevents us from lashing out in anger or withdrawing in silence. Adaptability allows us to adjust to changes in others while remaining grounded in ourselves. Confidence sustains self-respect without tipping into defensiveness. Discipline helps us to communicate even when it would be easier to avoid difficult conversations. In this way, the personal skills cultivated within become the very tools that sustain relationships without. A core component of mental strength in relationships is the ability to set and maintain healthy boundaries. Many people struggle with boundaries, either giving too much of themselves out of fear of disapproval or withdrawing too rigidly out of fear of vulnerability. Boundaries are not about building walls, but about creating clear agreements around what is acceptable and what is not. They protect energy, values, and emotional safety. For the mentally strong, boundaries are not acts of selfishness, but acts of integrity. They allow connection to flourish without resentment because they ensure that relationships are rooted in respect rather than obligation. The strength lies not only in setting boundaries, but in maintaining them consistently, even when it feels uncomfortable. Communication is another testing ground for mental strength. Words spoken in haste can damage trust, while silence in the face of conflict can create distance. Strong communication requires both clarity and courage. It means expressing needs and feelings honestly without aggression and listening openly without defensiveness. It requires the ability to pause, regulate emotion, and choose words carefully rather than reacting impulsively. This form of communication builds trust because it demonstrates both honesty and respect. The mentally strong recognize that communication is not about winning arguments, but about fostering understanding. Even in disagreement, they remain anchored in values of respect and integrity. Empathy is also a crucial quality of mentally strong relationships. Empathy does not mean losing oneself in another's feelings, but being able to step into their perspective and acknowledge their experience. This requires both openness and stability. Without openness, empathy collapses into indifference. Without stability, empathy collapses into enmeshment, where one's own boundaries dissolve. The mentally strong find balance. They can care deeply without being consumed, listen fully without losing their own voice, and support others without sacrificing themselves entirely. This balance makes relationships both nurturing and sustainable. Conflict is inevitable in any meaningful relationship. What distinguishes strong relationships from fragile ones is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to navigate it constructively. Mental strength in conflict means resisting the impulse to escalate, avoiding the temptation to retreat, and instead choosing to engage with patience and curiosity. It means being willing to admit mistakes, to forgive, and to repair trust. It also means knowing when to stand firm and when to compromise. Flexibility allows for resolution, but integrity ensures that compromise does not mean self-betrayal. The mentally strong do not fear conflict, but see it as an opportunity to deepen understanding and strengthen connection. An often overlooked aspect of mental strength in relationships is the ability to be vulnerable. Many equate vulnerability with weakness, but in truth, it is one of the deepest expressions of strength. To share fears, doubts, or hopes honestly requires courage because it opens the possibility of rejection. Yet vulnerability also creates the possibility of intimacy, trust, and authentic connection. Mentally strong individuals understand that hiding behind walls may protect from pain, but also prevents genuine closeness. By allowing themselves to be seen, they invite deeper bonds. Vulnerability is not reckless disclosure, but intentional openness, guided by trust and respect. Another expression of mental strength in relationships is the ability to let go of control. Many conflicts arise from the attempt to shape others into what we wish them to be. Yet true connection requires acceptance of the other as they are, not as we imagine them. This acceptance does not mean tolerating harm or abandoning standards, but recognizing that each person is responsible for their own growth. The mentally strong support and encourage others but do not try to control them. They respect autonomy, allowing relationships to flourish on the basis of mutual choice rather than coercion. Relationships also test mental strength in the realm of forgiveness. Holding on to resentment may feel protective, but it erodes connection and drains energy. Forgiveness does not mean excusing harmful behavior or erasing accountability. It means releasing the grip of anger and choosing not to be defined by hurt. Forgiveness is as much an act of self-liberation as it is an act of generosity toward others. The mentally strong understand that forgiveness frees the mind and heart to move forward. At the same time, they balance forgiveness with boundaries, ensuring that repeated harm is not tolerated. Supporting others without losing oneself is another delicate balance that requires strength. Many fall into patterns of overgiving, neglecting their own needs in the name of care. Others withdraw too far, fearing the demands of closeness. The mentally strong recognize that sustaining relationships requires reciprocity. They give generously but also receive. They support others but also care for themselves. They understand that the strength of a relationship depends not on self-sacrifice but on mutual nourishment. Ultimately, mental strength in relationships is about authenticity. It is about showing up as one's true self, speaking honestly, listening fully, and relating with respect. It is about building trust, not through perfection, but through consistency. It is about being willing to engage in the messy, imperfect, and often challenging dynamics of human connection without retreating into avoidance or collapsing into reactivity. Relationships thrive when both individuals are strong enough to maintain their own integrity, while open enough to connect with the integrity of the other. In the end, relationships are both the greatest challenge and the greatest reward of mental strength. They test our ability to regulate, to adapt, to communicate, to forgive, and to remain authentic. They also provide the deepest sources of meaning, joy, and resilience. The mentally strong understand that strength is not isolation, but connection. By bringing their skills of resilience, focus, discipline, confidence, and adaptability into relationships, they create bonds that are both durable and fulfilling. Mental strength in relationships is not about dominance or control, but about building spaces where both people can grow. It is the recognition that true strength is not measured by standing alone, but by standing together. Chapter 13. Mental strength in work and creativity. Work and creativity are two of the most powerful arenas in which mental strength reveals itself. Both demand sustained focus, discipline, resilience, adaptability, and confidence. Both confront us with uncertainty, setbacks, and pressures that test our inner resources. Work requires us to perform consistently in environments shaped by deadlines, expectations, and competition. Creativity requires us to generate ideas, take risks, and persist despite self-doubt and criticism. In both cases, the ability to manage thoughts, emotions, and actions in alignment with long-term goals determines whether we thrive or collapse under pressure. Mental strength in work and creativity is not about grinding endlessly, but about cultivating the psychological resilience and habits that sustain performance and innovation over time. In the modern workplace, demands often exceed the capacity of raw willpower. Constant notifications, shifting priorities, and relentless competition create environments of distraction and stress. Without mental strength, It is easy to become reactive, burned out, or overwhelmed. Focus allows us to cut through noise and direct attention where it matters most. Discipline ensures that actions align with values rather than being dictated solely by urgency. Emotional regulation enables us to navigate conflict, criticism, and pressure without losing composure. Adaptability allows us to adjust to change, whether it is a new technology, shifting roles, or unexpected obstacles. Confidence sustains self-belief even when results are uncertain. Each of these skills, cultivated individually, converges in the context of work to create sustainable performance. Creativity presents its own challenges. Unlike routine tasks, creative work involves uncertainty and risk. There are no guaranteed outcomes, and progress often comes through trial and error. Self-doubt and fear of failure are constant companions. Here, mental strength is essential. Confidence provides the courage to put ideas into the world despite vulnerability. Resilience allows us to face rejection or criticism without abandoning the work. Discipline ensures that creativity is not left to inspiration alone, but is cultivated through consistent practice. Adaptability helps us to experiment, to pivot when ideas fail, and to embrace unexpected directions. Creativity thrives not on the absence of struggle, but on the capacity to persevere and evolve through it. One of the greatest obstacles in both work and creativity is perfectionism. The drive for flawless outcomes often paralyzes action and stifles innovation. Perfectionism is fueled by fear of criticism, fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy. Mental strength counters this fear with resilience and reframing. Instead of seeing mistakes as disasters, the mentally strong see them as part of the process. They understand that progress is iterative, that improvement comes through practice and feedback, and that failure is not final. This perspective frees energy for experimentation and risk-taking, which are the lifeblood of creativity and growth in any field. Another dimension of mental strength in work is the capacity to manage stress productively. Pressure can be destructive when viewed as overwhelming, but it can also sharpen performance when viewed as challenge. Stress, reframed as energy mobilized for performance, becomes fuel rather than drain. Mentally strong individuals harness stress, balancing intense effort with deliberate recovery. They recognize that sustained performance requires cycles of focus and renewal. This balance prevents burnout and allows for consistent engagement over the long term. Without recovery, even the strongest discipline collapses. With it, resilience grows deeper with every cycle of stress and restoration. Collaboration is another area where mental strength proves vital. Work and creative endeavors rarely happen in isolation. They involve teams, clients, audiences, and collaborators. Mental strength in collaboration means balancing self-confidence with humility, standing firm in ideas while being open to others. It means managing conflict constructively, listening actively, and contributing consistently. It also means maintaining boundaries so that collaboration does not become exploitation. Strong teams are built not only on technical skills but on emotional resilience, adaptability, and trust, all qualities rooted in mental strength. The mentally strong also recognize the importance of purpose in work and creativity. Without connection to deeper values, work becomes drudgery and creativity becomes hollow. Purpose provides meaning that sustains effort through difficulty. It transforms stress into sacrifice worth making and setbacks into temporary challenges on the path to something larger. For some, purpose comes from serving others. For others, from mastery of a craft. For others, from contributing to knowledge or beauty. Whatever the form, purpose aligns effort with meaning, creating resilience that sheer ambition cannot sustain. An overlooked aspect of mental strength in work and creativity is the relationship with time. Distraction and procrastination erode progress, while obsession and overwork erode health. Mentally strong individuals cultivate a balanced relationship with time. They manage attention deliberately, setting aside blocks for focused work and protecting them from intrusion. They also respect the need for rest, recognizing that creativity often arises in spaces of stillness and that sustained work requires renewal. By practicing discipline with time, they prevent both stagnation and burnout. Self-belief in the context of creativity often demands the courage to face external judgment. Every creative act, whether writing, painting, designing, or innovating, exposes the creator to critique. Without mental strength, fear of judgment can silence expression. With it, critique becomes information rather than condemnation. The mentally strong take what is useful, discard what is not, and continue creating. They understand that no work will please everyone, that originality invites resistance as well as praise, and that persistence matters more than universal approval. This resilience allows creativity to flourish even in the face of external noise. Work and creativity also test our adaptability to failure. Projects collapse, markets shift, ideas fall flat. The rigid response is despair or denial. The flexible response is learning, adjusting, and continuing. History is full of individuals whose greatest contributions emerged only after repeated failures. Mental strength is what allowed them to continue. It is what allows us to reinterpret failure not as evidence of inadequacy, but as data for growth. This perspective is not naive optimism, but grounded resilience, the recognition that every setback contains information that can guide the next attempt. Ultimately, mental strength in work and creativity is about alignment. It is about aligning actions with values, effort with purpose, persistence with adaptability, and ambition with balance. It is about cultivating habits that sustain performance while also protecting well-being. It is about facing the inevitable pressures of deadlines, uncertainty, and criticism with resilience rather than collapse. It is about showing up consistently, creating courageously, and adapting continuously. Work and creativity will always involve challenge, but those challenges are not barriers, they are invitations. They call us to grow beyond comfort, to develop resilience, to cultivate focus, and to deepen confidence. They are the proving grounds of mental strength. When we meet them with the habits and mindset of resilience, they cease to be sources of exhaustion alone and become arenas of growth and meaning. To be mentally strong in work and creativity is not to avoid difficulty but to harness it, to transform stress into energy, failure into feedback, and uncertainty into opportunity. It is to recognize that every task, every project, every creative act is not only an external effort, but an inner training ground, shaping us into individuals capable of thriving in both the challenges of work and the risks of creation. Chapter 14: The Strength Mindset. Mental strength is not simply a collection of skills, habits, or strategies. It is a way of approaching life, a perspective that shapes how we interpret challenges, how we respond to setbacks, and how we engage with opportunities. This perspective can be called the strength mindset. It is the recognition that difficulty is not a signal to retreat, but an invitation to grow, that uncertainty is not merely a threat, but also a space of potential, and that resilience is not about avoiding hardship, but about being transformed by it. A strength mindset does not mean seeking struggle for its own sake or denying the reality of pain. It means choosing to see in every circumstance the possibility of growth, meaning, and adaptation. The strength mindset begins with the belief that abilities are not fixed. This belief is supported by the science of neuroplasticity and the psychology of growth mindset, which show that skills, resilience, and even emotional patterns can be developed through effort and practice. When we believe we can grow, we engage with challenges differently. Instead of avoiding difficulty, we lean into it, knowing that effort is the path to expansion. Instead of seeing failure as proof of inadequacy, we see it as feedback. Instead of being crushed by setbacks, we integrate them into the larger story of development. This perspective transforms the very texture of experience, making every challenge a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. Another aspect of the strength mindset is the reframing of stress and adversity. Stress is inevitable, but its meaning is not predetermined. With the right mindset, stress becomes energy mobilized for performance, and adversity becomes a teacher, Instead of interpreting pressure as evidence of danger, we interpret it as proof that something meaningful is at stake. Instead of resenting obstacles, we ask what they can teach us. This shift does not erase hardship, but it alters its impact. Pain remains, but it is no longer meaningless. Discomfort remains, but it is no longer paralyzing. The strength mindset does not deny difficulty. It dignifies it by giving it purpose. The strength mindset also emphasizes agency. While we cannot control every circumstance, we can always control how we interpret and respond. This awareness is liberating. It reminds us that no matter how unpredictable or chaotic life becomes, we retain the power to choose our stance. We may not choose whether storms come, but we choose whether to collapse in fear or to navigate with courage. Agency does not mean omnipotence. It means responsibility for our own part. This responsibility grounds us because it shifts focus from helplessness to possibility. The mentally strong individual recognizes that power lies not in controlling the uncontrollable, but in mastering the controllable. A strength mindset is also characterized by anti-fragility, the ability not only to withstand stress but to grow stronger because of it. Just as muscles grow through resistance and bones strengthen under pressure, the mind grows through challenge. Every difficulty faced with resilience becomes a form of training, expanding capacity for the next challenge. The strength mindset sees adversity not as something to survive and forget, but as something that actively builds strength. Failures become teachers, losses become sources of empathy, and obstacles become catalysts for innovation. This perspective transforms life from a series of problems to be endured into a series of opportunities to be shaped. Gratitude and meaning are essential elements of the strength mindset. Gratitude trains attention on what is present and valuable rather than what is absent or lacking. Meaning frames hardship as part of a larger story. Together, they prevent despair by grounding us in perspective. When gratitude becomes a habit, even small joys shine amid difficulty. When meaning guides interpretation, even painful experiences become part of a narrative of growth. The strength mindset weaves gratitude and meaning into daily life, creating a foundation that steadies us when circumstances shake. The strength mindset also balances ambition with acceptance. It strives for growth while acknowledging limits. It seeks improvement while respecting rest. It pursues excellence while remaining humble. This balance prevents the distortions of both complacency and perfectionism. Complacency resists growth. Perfectionism destroys joy. The strength mindset holds both effort and grace, intensity and renewal. It recognizes that strength is not found in constant striving alone, but also in the rhythm of persistence and pause. Relationships play an important role in the strength mindset. We do not become mentally strong in isolation. Supportive communities amplify resilience, while toxic environments undermine it. The strength mindset values connection, seeks out mentors, and invests in relationships that nourish growth. It also contributes to others, offering encouragement, empathy, and guidance. Strength shared becomes strength multiplied. In this way, the mindset expands beyond the individual to the collective, creating cultures of resilience in families, workplaces, and communities. Ultimately, the strength mindset is a choice, one that must be renewed daily. Each moment offers the option to interpret challenges as threats or as opportunities. Each setback offers the choice to give up or to adapt. Each stressor offers the chance to collapse or to grow. These choices, repeated over time, shape who we become. The mindset is not about never feeling weak, but about returning again and again to the stance of strength. It is about acknowledging vulnerability, fear, and fatigue, while still choosing courage, perseverance, and growth. To adopt the strength mindset is to see life not as something happening to us, but as something happening for us, to learn, adapt, and evolve. It is to stand firmly in the belief that every experience, no matter how difficult, can be integrated into a larger narrative of resilience. It is to accept that storms will come, but to trust that we can bend without breaking, adapt without losing our core, and emerge stronger than before. Mental strength is not the absence of struggle. It is the mastery of response. The strength mindset is the lens through which this mastery becomes possible. In the end, the strength mindset transforms the way we live. It frees us from fear of failure, because failure becomes feedback. It frees us from paralysis in uncertainty, because uncertainty becomes potential. It frees us from resentment of stress, because stress becomes energy for growth. It does not eliminate difficulty, but equips us to meet it with clarity, courage, and resilience. To cultivate this mindset is to cultivate not only survival but flourishing. It is to live with the quiet assurance that whatever comes, we have within us the capacity to face it, learn from it, and grow through it. This is the essence of mental strength. Not a shield against life's challenges, but a stance of openness and resilience that turns every challenge into an opportunity for transformation.